The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Montyman.
Well, welcome aboard, one and all. Come on in and have a seat, and hopefully you'll be relaxing while you tune into this week's episode of Walking Through the Language of the Heart with Chris S. Howdy, Chris.
Hey, Monty, how are you?
Oh, I'm so much better. So, listeners, you knew I was sick one week, and then we came back, and then I was sick another week. Sorry about that. But everything seems to be back to normal, whatever that means. But we are here and ready to go. Chris, what are we doing this week for the episode?
All right, we're on page 308 of The Language of the Heart. We've been going through like crazy. We've been going through all of these articles that Bill wrote for the Grapevine. So we're in July 1960, and the title of the article we're going to read tonight is AA Tomorrow. So this, I think this is going to be pretty interesting because 1960 was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was.
Like, it was 60 some years ago.
Right.
So we're going to see how prophetic he was. If he's talking about what AA is going to be like in the future, we'll see how accurate he was. And, knowing Bill was prophetic. He saw things ahead of time. He was a visionary. Right. So we'll see, so let's go ahead and get started. This book has given us some wonderful glimpses of the panorama of AA at work in the 25th year of its founding. We marvel and rejoice that the near impossible has really happened. All this has indeed depended upon our many channels of communication and our singular ability to use them. I wonder what book he's referring to.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
This book.
He's not referring to the Grapevine because it really wasn't considered a book, right?
I don't know. I hope we find out.
Yeah.
Now comes the question. Where do we go from here, and what is our responsibility for today and tomorrow? Clearly, our first duty to AA's future is to maintain in full strength what we now have. Only the most vigilant caretaking can assure this. Never should we be lulled into complacent self-satisfaction by the wide acclaim and success that is everywhere ours. This is the subtle temptation which could stagnate us today, perchance disintegrate us tomorrow. We have always rallied to meet and transcend failure and crisis. Problems have been our stimulants. How well, though, shall we be able to meet the problems of success? This is a different context, really. 60 years ago, it just seemed like, AA was on a roll. Everybody had great things to say about AA, and that's just not true anymore, unfortunately. Yeah. There's a lot of competing forces. There's the competing treatment and recovery for money businesses. There's the pharmaceutical and psychiatric influences in alcoholism recovery. I saw an ad on TV the other day, having a problem, drinking? You have a drinking problem? Would you like to cut back or stop altogether? Call this phone number.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, one person said he saw one of those ads one time. Have a drinking problem? Call this phone number. So he called it. He was an AA member. He wanted to see what it was. It was a liquor store. Is that great? So that shows you can't really trust some of these things.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Isn't it?
Oh, gosh.
Well, we continue to search out the ever-present flaws and gaps in our communications. With enough imagination, courage, and dedication, will we resolutely address ourselves to those many tasks of repair and improvement which even now the future is calling upon us to undertake. Still, clearer vision and an ever-mounting sense of responsibility can be the only answers to these questions. So Bill was always preparing the fellowship to take care of itself. Telling us it's going to be vitally important, that we're going to have to put principles before personalities. There's a million messages. We've read a million of them already. And I'm wondering right now, with the decisions Alcoholics Anonymous is making.
Yeah.
I wonder right now if we are going to be able to make the decisions to continue this particular endeavor called Alcoholics Anonymous. It seems to me that some of the decisions are not being made from a spiritual foundation, from a service foundation. They seem to be other motivations, and I've started to worry over the last 5 years or so. I've really started to worry about, will the right people be in the right places to keep this thing going? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think it was. I'm going to jump back here. The last episode we did, which was Let's Keep It Simple, But How? There was a paragraph in there, and I want to jump back to that really quick.
Sure.
He's talking about the mentality of the kitchen table era, where you could just get together with a few people and keep it simple and just share each other's stuff and be accountable to each other and that kind of thing. And there seems to be a cry for going back to that. And he says, most certainly indeed, a return to the kitchen table era would bring no hope for simplicity. It could only mean wholesale irresponsibility, disharmony, and ineffectiveness. Let's picture this. There would be no definite guiding principles, no literature, no meeting halls, no group funds, no planned sponsorship, no stable leadership. He goes on, all the things that wouldn't be in place if the traditions hadn't been put together. And he says what worked fine for 200 members in 1938 won't work at all for more than 200,000 of them in 1960. So I'm thinking he was hoping that the traditions would be the watchdog, right? But
yes.
But the further we remove ourselves from adhering to the traditions, to the degree that the traditions are written in jello. They should never be broken, but they must be flexible, my opinion. Okay?
Yeah.
But they are very important. And when we move into an era where they're just kind of important, or, we have to put up with them, I think we're in a dangerous place. And I think that's where we're at with the onslaught of some of the new ideas coming out. And I think part of it is because a lot of the people involved in the decision making may or may not have ever had a spiritual awakening as a result of the step work. What say you?
We've talked about this before. I'm in total agreement. I think to be involved in the service structure as a non-alcoholic, to be involved, as an alcoholic, to be involved in the service structure, if you haven't paid all the money back, if you don't pray and meditate every day, if you haven't done a full-blown fifth step, if you're not sponsoring other people and taking them through the steps, you've got no business in the service structure.
None.
You just
None.
don't. Because you don't have the AA experience.
Right.
And and the AA experience is what informs about what is best about Alcoholics Anonymous. I've met many people in the service structure, and they got in there because it was in their personality traits, and it felt more comfortable to them. It's almost more businesslike, and it was the milieu that they drifted toward, and they were marginal AA members to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And all the character defects that can be addressed through the practice of and adherence to the spiritual principles and practices are still all over them. So they're in there power driving, and they're in there with out of control egos, and they're susceptible to being shined on by different members, and it can be a real mess. So I think that's what's contributed to some of the voting and some of the changes in the structure of AA World Services that have kind of protected them from the noise of the fellowship. You know what I mean? The groups are in charge, but we really don't want to hear from the groups about this. So we're changing the rules so you can't bring that up in our assemblies. Things like that I see as incredibly dangerous. You know what I mean? To the welfare of this thing as a whole. I could be totally wrong. This is an opinion of mine, but we haven't increased our fellowship numbers since like 1980, and so that doesn't necessarily mean the membership numbers doesn't necessarily mean we're not being effective, but it would seem that if the people who came to AA stayed, all right, if the people who came to AA stayed, we'd be a whole lot more than 2 million.
Yes.
So the problem I see is, why don't they stay? And the problem General Service sees is, why don't we get to more people? Why don't we throw out more literature? Why don't we blanket the area with pamphlets? Why don't we get to every single alcoholic we can find? And the problem is they're creating a 5-lane highway that's going to lead to a dirt road.
Yeah.
Because these people are going to come to AA, and they're going to go to the Loony Noonie on Thursday. Or they're going to go to the closed-minded discussion on Friday morning. They don't know any better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I would see that the emphasis and the attention from Alcoholics Anonymous should be on encouraging and making it well known to all that to be a member in good standing, the 12 steps have to be practiced. Something simple like that, I think, would take our membership from 2 million to 30 in 20 years.
Yeah, and that's just the very basic stuff, right? The 12 steps are crying out loud.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my goodness.
And there seems to be an aversion
Yes.
to the 12 steps in the Big Book coming from New York. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I've watched two of my sponsees pull something that just I was having a hard time wrapping my head around it. One of them just moved, didn't even say anything to me about it at all, got back and made restitution with his ex-wife, and I saw that happening, and that was a good thing and all, but all of a sudden he's back, he's out of state now, living with her, and hadn't said a word to me. He just went, right? And he's at step 6. Right. And so I was trying to, I tried to move through the steps swiftly. So he was at step 6. And the other one has gotten so involved in community services and doing service work and so forth, not within the fellowship, but outside of the fellowship, it in really good, healthy ways. And that's great. But he has found his home in another 12-step program. For him personally, it's wonderful. But it's like, don't forget from whence you came, bro. You know what I mean? Don't abandon us. I mean, at least come once a week, for crying out loud. But he's just gone.
they aren't teaching the discipline of consistent meeting attendance, adherence to sponsorship
Yeah.
and direction, the finishing of the steps, the putting 10, 11, and 12 into a daily life,
There it is right
a
there.
daily way to
Yeah.
live.
10, 11, and 12. Yeah.
There's no adherence to that, and sponsors have you know it's almost a different world today than it was back then. But we, our communication is different. We're separated more than we were. I remember in the '60s, every night there was something to do with other people,
Sure.
just normal, from family.
Yeah.
And today it's streaming Netflix and going on the computer. So it's kind of a different world. But we need to pay attention to what is going to, what's absolutely necessary to keep this thing available to our grandchildren and to our grandchildren's grandchildren, because it was so vital and it was so impactful for me. I've spent, me, I've spent most of the last 35 years actively, being an enthusiastic member in good standing of this particular fellowship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there was a time too when it really didn't cost a whole lot to make a cooler full of sandwiches for the weekend. Everybody pile into the van and go to an assembly or go to a workshop or a conference or whatever, and everybody piled into one hotel room, and the hotels would let you do it. And but today, I wanted to take two of my sponsees to an event. They didn't have the money, and the thing was so blasted expensive,
Yeah.
And so when you went to those things, you got excited about getting involved even further into those things. But if you're not there, you don't know what you don't know.
Enthusiastic activity breeds enthusiasm, and thereby more activity. So and that is really a protection against slipping and sliding, disappearing, and backing away, and the ultimate relapse that's going to follow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
All right. So what then is the real size and reach of our foreseeable responsibilities? During the last 25 years, it is quite certain that 25 million men and women throughout the world have suffered alcoholism. Nearly all of these are now sick, mad, or dead. AA has brought recovery to something like 250,000. The rest are still out of reach or else gone beyond recall. An even larger generation of drunks is right now in the making. Facing the enormity of this situation, shall any of us sit comfortably and say, well, people, here we are. We hope you hear about us and come around. Then maybe we can give you a hand. Of course, we shall do nothing of the sort. We know that we are going to open wider and wider every conceivable means and channel through which these kinfolks of ours may be reached. We shall remember Dr. Bob and his marvelous co-worker, Sister Ignatia, how they worked in Akron. We shall remember that many years of Silky's unstinted labor for us, 10,000 AAs still around, will remember how they literally owed their lives to these three people. Each of us will remember his own sponsor, the one who cared enough, as he inherits, as the inheritors of such tradition of service. How many could ever say, let George do that 12-step job? He likes to work with drunks anyhow. Besides, I'm busy. Surely there could not be many. Complacency would be impossible.
Wow.
Yeah, you want to bet, Bill?
Wow.
You want to bet? I wish they did a poll of every active AA member and how much 12-step work, real 12-step work they do. I don't mean putting away chairs at the meeting.
Right.
I don't mean the commitment at the jail or the detox. I mean taking somebody, meeting one-on-one with somebody and taking them through the steps.
Yeah.
Bill is assuming everybody does that back in 1960.
Yeah. He says, well, people, here we are. We hope you hear about us and come around. Then maybe we'll give you a hand.
That's what we're like today.
That's exactly what we're like today. And he's saying, may
that's
that
what
never
he was
be.
warning us about.
Oh boy.
Oh man. And it's just because we are what we are. Yeah. You know, and we've dropped the ball and we've let other people pick it up, and I don't know, Monty. I think Bill would really have a problem with what AA looks like today. I really would. And I'm not saying they aren't great groups and there aren't great
Oh, there's
people,
some wonderful groups.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying there's not great service structure members.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that as a whole, as an aggregate, you walk into an AA meeting and you poll the people. How many of you have all paid the money back? How many of you all, upon awakening, think about the day ahead and do your evening review? How many of you have done a fearless and moral, thorough inventory and then shared it with somebody and continue to take personal inventory and continue to make amends and continue to set right the wrongs? And how many of you are actively seeking out alcoholics to take through the steps? How many of you? You there could be meetings where you don't even get one hand.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
So this is exactly what Bill was warning us about. Our next great area of future responsibility may be this one. I'm thinking about the total problem of alcohol and about all of those who must still suffer the appalling consequences of alcoholism. Their number is astronomical. It runs into hundreds of millions. Here's such a sampling of that problem. Because of our drinking, most of us banged up our kids. Their emotional scars should have made them naturals for alcoholism. Yet it is startlingly true that teenage children of good AA members show almost no sign of becoming drunks. I don't know about that, Bill. They drink moderately or not at all. If a few of the vulnerable do hit the bottle and the telltale symptoms and episodes show up, most can stop, and they do. Now, why is this? Now, that's kind of true. Like if you're an active alcoholic and your father's in AA and your mother's in Al-Anon and your brother's in AA and your sister's in Al-Anon, you got a better shot at paying attention to the possibility of recovery for you, for yourself. I've seen that. The answer is alcohol education, AA style. Of course, we have never told our kids not to drink, but for years around the house and at meetings, they have heard what the score really is and what alcoholism can do to people. They have seen the old man in action, first as an alcoholic, then as an AA member. This is the kind of education that has no doubt already saved 100,000 of our children. I don't know if I completely agree with this. I think if you have the alcohol gene, I don't know that prevention is something that is really going to work. I've never been a big prevention proponent. I know everyone wants to give money to prevention, but how the hell do you even measure prevention?
I think, Chris, I think prevention is good as some education towards people that might not be alcoholic but might abuse alcohol and get themselves in a car accident or run the neighbor kid on his paper route off the road or something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And for them, I think it's good. Just like the DARE program was for kids when it came to drugs. Some drug awareness. I think it helped those who were not addicts or those who were not alcoholics. But I agree, and I think the science proves out today too that when it comes to alcoholism, maybe not narcotic addiction, but when it comes to alcoholism, you either genetically either have it or you don't. You don't develop it by drinking it too much.
And if you start drinking, whether it's at 13 or 25,
right.
Something awakens in you that is genetic.
Yeah.
It's spiritual. It's mental. And you're off to the races, and that's just what I've seen. I've seen whole families of alcoholism.
Oh yeah.
Two of the people I love the most in this world who just moved to Florida. They both long time 40-year AA members, right? And like every single one of their kids they had like 6 kids. They all ended up in treatment or have struggled or. I'm telling you, it's genetic.
So when he says, of course, we have never told our kids not to drink. Well, maybe you haven't. I have, just simply on the basis of common sense. I mean, I said, how many great, good, positive outcomes, are rooted in drinking? None. How many destructive outcomes are rooted in drinking? Millions. So it may not be a wise thing to even start. That's kind of the way I approached it with my kids.
Here's some personal experience from my family. When my daughter was growing up, she would go to AA meetings with me. I got sober when she was about 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
And when she was visiting me, I would take her to meetings. Everybody loved her. And I had a talk with her one time when she was about 15, 16. I said this to her. I go, look, I'm alcoholic. So your father's an alcoholic. Your mother's whole family was alcoholic. Both of your grandparents and three of your grandparents were alcoholic. Three of your uncles on your mother's side died of alcoholism. Here's my warning to you. If you get on this horse and start riding it, the genetic chances of you, experiencing not good stuff is great. And I've got to tell you, she doesn't drink.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, maybe she had a beer here or there, but she never became a drinker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was because of the talk I had. I have no idea, but I guarantee if you gave her a pint of vodka every day for the next year, you'd have an active
Gotcha.
alcoholic on your hand.
Yeah.
I just know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what about other people's kids? Have we no concern for them? Of course we do have concern. While we appreciate that AA itself cannot very well get into alcohol education or into any of the related activities that touch the total population, we do know that as peculiarly well-informed citizens, there is plenty we can and should do in these fields. Enterprises of this sort, governmental, state, and private, have been springing up everywhere in recognition of the fact that alcoholism is a top priority problem of health. Nearly every one of these agencies tells us it has been inspired to work on by the example of the AAs have set them. Now they take their turn as pioneers. Naturally, they are bound to make some mistakes. Certainly, we can understand this. In fact, we like to say that we ourselves have progressed mostly by trial and error. A good number of these undertakings are now going places, and their promise is very large. I think he's talking about, let's say Yale School of Alcohol Studies was the first, then it moved to Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
And he could be talking about the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, and he could be talking about the early, treatment industries. They all kind of became modern pieces of business, after 1960.
Mm-hmm.
So nevertheless, I gather the impression that many of us are so intent on their few errors, especially the errors those AAs associated with them, that we often fail to give these dedicated people the encouragement they much need. Now that we AAs have so amazingly unified around our single purpose and the 12 traditions, the risk that we could be much hurt by anything done in these outside ventures is virtually non-existent. I've been involved in a million outside enterprises, Monty. Next week, I'm going to be hosting a fireside chat at a PCORI event. It's a group of educational people who have grant funding for research projects, and we're going to have this big roundtable, and we're going to be throwing out ideas for them to research that will make transitional living for alcoholics and addicts, more available and more efficacious, more effective. We'll just be throwing out things for them to study in this fireside chat. I've been working with the NCADD for years.
Yeah.
We try to promote recovery-oriented systems of care. I've been working with PTAC. We try to train police departments in how to do pre-arrest diversion and deflection. I'm involved in all this stuff for some crazy. I'm like the recovery guy, that they bring into some of these, because most of these are run by non-alcoholics. But it's not hurting AA, and it's not hurting me as an AA member to be a part of these things.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's just trying to be helpful. Let's instead keep focused on the fact that there are some 24,750,000 drunks left in the world. Could not still more friendly and widespread cooperation with outside agencies finally lead us to countless alcoholics who will otherwise be lost? Maybe we are beginning to stand in our own light. Perhaps we are blocking a communication that has a tremendous potential. Shouldn't we therefore have a fresh look? I'm going to say this again. I'm going to get up on the soapbox again. What Bill is talking about is he's talking about if AA touches these people, they'll have a 50% chance of staying sober from that moment on, 75% chance if they that they're going to relapse but then finally come in and stay sober if they're worked with the way it's talked about in the chapter Working with Others.
Yes.
That's what he's talking about. AA spreading pamphlets throughout a prison is not touching AAs in an effective way.
No.
It's you know what I mean? Like the saddest thing I ever see, Monty, is when you talk to these people in the treatment centers, and I'm always giving talks in treatment centers, and you ask them, hey, have you ever been to AA? Yeah, I've been to AA. Well, tell me what your experience was. Well, I went to a few meetings and all they were doing was complaining and
right.
It just I didn't see any point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I hear
so
that all the
AA
time.
has already reached them.
Yeah.
Bad AA has reached them. So it's not whether AA can touch these people. It's how they touch these people. You know what I'm saying, Monty?
Right.
Inside AA, well, how do we stand? It is a fact, and a perfectly explicable one, that the number of Al-Anon family groups has jumped from a handful to 1,300 of them in less than 10 years. They are tackling one of the toughest problems that an alcoholic and his family can have, inside AA or out. This is a terrific distortion of that we alcoholics force upon our wives and husbands through destructive drinking. Drinking that has led us into a highly abnormal dependency upon them. Active drunks frequently turn themselves into rebellious and wayward children, thereby compelling their marriage partners to become their protective custodians, their mamas and papas. This has often resulted in a built-in pattern, one most difficult to erase. The coming of sobriety in AA gave them a remedy. Indeed, sobriety sometimes aggravates this often intolerable condition. The Al-Anon family groups comprised of wives and husbands of alcoholics now see this picture clearly, far more clearly, in fact, than do most of us AAs. In their own groups, they are now working to repair that damage, along with their other defects, by the practice of AA's 12 steps. More than some of us, these life partners of ours are trying hard to practice AA principles in all their affairs. The family groups have already made a big dent in this mighty tough problem, and there is evidence of far more to come. Can't we therefore give this remarkable project our greatest possible understanding and encouragement, and let each of us do his full share of that repair job at home? Yeah, these are great ideals. These are great targets that Bill is setting for us.
Was there some criticism going on here in 1960 about Al-Anon?
The only reference point I would have is I've listened to some speaker tapes that preceded 1960. There were some great speakers, and they got recorded, and it's scratchy and it's hard to hear, but they were every single large convention would record their speakers, and every once in a while one of them would have an Al-Anon joke. Sometimes in not meaning any real harm. Sometimes not really, not really caring about any harm. Going for a laugh. So that's what I can tell you about pre-1960. I think today the hope is that family members will discover that the spiritual life is not a theory, and if they live it, it will offer them incredible benefits.
Yeah.
And I think any alcoholic in the world would be happy with any of their family member, trying to put into practice these spiritual principles, because they bring about a productive, purposeful, serenity-filled life. They just do.
I ask you that question because and I think we talked about this a long time ago. I've always found it interesting how we talk about not being affiliated with anybody else, and yet when it comes to Al-Anon, we break through all traditions. It seems like, you know what I mean. It's like that's the one realm where we've seen wisdom and just kind of leaving that alone, letting it be, and letting Al-Anon thrive, which I think is the right call, actually.
Absolutely, they have it's an outside issue. You know, like Al-Anon, we should never denigrate that or any outside issue as an AA member, right?
Right.
But you know how the tradition is tweaked a little is, you know, there'll be AA conventions and there'll be Al-Anon speakers.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like my favorite convention format is the Fellowship of the Spirit. It started in Colorado in the early 90s, and they always had Al-Anon representation throughout the event. And you could make a case that, you know, that really isn't, that doesn't really line up with our traditions, right?
Sure.
However, it lines up with our principles.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You know what I mean? It may not line up with our traditions, but it lines up with our principles to you know, be healthy, to try to make amends. You know, we could scarcely set right the wrongs in a lifetime. It says in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, to our family members, right? So I think, you know, I'm certainly willing to bend. You know, I had a big book meeting that I was booking for, and in like 2002 or something, I had an Al-Anon speaker come in. We had speakers come in every Wednesday, and I had an Al-Anon speaker come in, and she gave a great talk. And this was, it was always AA speakers, right? It was like a big book talk, and she gave a talk, and it was a great talk. And I got criticism throughout the realm, but not by anybody that was at the meeting.
Isn't that
people who had heard about it wanted to talk to me about it?
Yeah, of course.
And my response to them was, well, did you go to the meeting? No, I didn't go to the meeting. Well, I'm not interested in talking about your opinion of something that you didn't experience.
Yeah,
you know,
that's great.
If you want to talk to me about something, you know, have the dignity and the decency to come to it before and experience it before you want to argue with me about it. And yeah, you know, I'm not always the most popular person around.
Never.
Never. Then there is among us AAs the ever-present need for further spiritual growth. Here, most of us show a heavy deficit, and I'm a notable example. The simplest self-questioning can reveal such deficiencies. For instance, am I trying to practice these principles in all my own affairs, or am I simply complacent and quite content with just enough spiritual nourishment to keep me sober? Do I really possess the spiritual resources to see me through some rough going? Or do I think pretty well of my spiritual demonstration because A, things are pretty good at home, B, I got a big raise, C, they made me vice president of my lodge, or if things go badly and I begin to be jittery, depressed, anxious, or resentful, then do I justify my resulting self-pity and guilt by blaming my bad breaks, or more usually the behavior of other people? Or do I fall back on the old refrain that I'm a sick alcoholic, therefore not responsible?
There you go.
Nearly all of us, when we think about it, agree that we are a long, long way from being anywhere near grown up. For almost any point of view, we can clearly see that our job as individuals and as a fellowships is to keep right on growing by the constant use of our 12 steps. Monty, you and I have to keep growing through the constant use of our 12 steps. That's what Bill told us to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not, you can't, I don't care how much you try, you cannot polish up the flesh. You know what I mean? I have to die to myself every day. I need to renew my mind every day. I've got to keep this stuff going because left to my own devices, even now, left to my own devices, I'm back where I started.
Yeah.
Yep. I hear you, brother.
That's true. Of course, we may be certain that this will be a slow business, but we also know we can never take our plodding progress as the slightest alibi for setting ourselves second rate goals. That's a great sentence
Hmm.
because a lot of times, we really don't think this is working, or we should be better than we are right now, or I can't believe I'm still doing this, or any other number of things we tell ourselves. Our high aim can be emotional sobriety, full emotional maturity, and that's good. However, I think most of us may prefer a still larger definition, one with a still broader and higher reach. Perhaps there can be no relative in any universe unless somewhere there is an absolute. To most of us, this absolute is God as we understand Him. We feel that we were born to live, to this life to grow, if only a little, towards that likeness and image. However small and prudent our next immediate step on the path of progress may be, we of AA can never set any hampering limitations upon the ultimate destiny of ourselves and our fellowship, nor any whatsoever upon God's love for us all. Individually and collectively, structurally and spiritually, we shall ever need to build for the future. We are still laying down the foundation on which all coming generations of AA will have to stand, perhaps for centuries.
Mm.
Man, that is a powerful
Boy,
paragraph.
some people need to read that again.
Yeah,
Yep.
I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
One fellowship has been permitted to achieve, though still in miniature, the one world dream of philosophers. Ours is a world in which we can hotly differ, yet never think of schism or conflict as solution. As a fellowship, we ask nothing of wealth or power. As we better use the language of the heart, our communications grow apace. Already we find ourselves in safe passage through all those barriers of distance and language, of social distinctions, nationalities and creeds that so divide the world of our time. For so long as we remain sure that our one world of AA is God's gift rather than any virtue earned or created by ourselves, and for so long as our one world continues to be ever more inclusive of those in need, and for so long as we speak and try to perfect the language of love, for just so long may we count upon making whatever rendezvous with destiny that God should have for us.
Wow.
That's one of my favorites so far, Monty.
That is really, really good. Okay. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. I can see people today that are in favor of rewriting some of our literature, he said knowingly, that could take this paragraph out of context. For so long as we remain sure that our one world of AA is God's gift rather than any virtue earned or created by ourselves, and for so long as our one world continues to be ever more inclusive of those in need, that would be the people that don't identify with the four editions of the Big Book, but may identify with this new plain language Big Book that we're writing. And for so long as we speak and try to perfect the language of love, that's what we're doing in this new version, and for just as long as we may count upon making whatever rendezvous with destiny that God would have us. That's all we're trying to do, is spread open the doors even wider for people in need. Bill said it right here. How would you respond to that?
How's it working for you? That's how I would respond. How come there's no more there's less members now than there was in 1980? How's it working for you? Why don't you ask yourself, what are you doing wrong? Instead of coming up with some idea to put some new literature out that
Right.
That's going to confuse everybody, that all of a sudden meetings that don't know any better are just going to have the plain language Big Book. They're not going to buy the Big Book anymore, because this is simpler and easier, and we can have meetings on this. Its format is more clear. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you, and see, I personally don't. There's a handful of folks. I don't think the love of God and reaching more people that are in need. I don't think that's their agenda. My personal. This is me now. I'm not speaking for AA or any AA. My personal opinion is there's some ego stuff going on here, and if they can just pile drive this thing through, what a good boy am I? Look what we produced. And I think that's what's at the basis. And I think it's a handful. I don't think it's the majority. I just think the majority doesn't have enough guts to stand up and pound the gavel of, no, we're not doing that. But that's just me.
So, just to talk about this for a minute, I believe that this is what I believe. And listen, I could be wrong because I'm not involved in the service structure, but this is what I think. Like this is the case I would prosecute if I was, an attorney.
Okay.
Is a core group of people that are in the service structure have wanted to change things about the Big Book for a million years.
Long time, yeah.
A long, long time. And how do you do that when it keeps getting voted down? Whenever you're going to change the actual Big Book, it gets voted down when they put it out there to the groups. So what we're going to have to do is if we want this done, we can't put it out to the groups.
Right.
So here's how we'll do it. We will send it to the translation department and tell them it's a plain language Big Book. And then what we're going to do is we're going to convince all the trustees who are going to need to vote on this. Because, we're going to convince the trustees of all of the good reasons to do this. And there was no one on the other side of the argument that would share the bad reasons to do it. So these delegates, let's say there's, 50 of them or whatever, 2/3 of them voted to go ahead and publish it. Go ahead and publish it. They need it in the jails. What they didn't do is they didn't go to people like Judy, who's been in jail and institutional commitments for 40 years, and ask her what she thought. Is this going to help anybody in the jails? And she's like, no, it's not going to help anybody in the jails. So there was nobody else from the other side of the argument because they locked out the fellowship. They locked the fellowship out. So they locked out any criticism of it. And you'll get people that'll say, "Oh, Chris, you're being unreasonable. I was there, at the World Service when they talked about this, and I want to tell you why I think it's a good idea." And those are usually the people that couldn't convince me that they're alcoholic. You know what I mean?
Right.
But they were sold a bill of goods. Now there's some really, really good trustees. I was back and forth with one of them with emails, and I've come to have an enormous amount. This is a delegate out of the Tennessee area. I've got enormous respect for this guy. He told me I voted against it, but Chris, not for the reasons you're stating. I voted against it for different reasons. I read it. I had the 2-hour reading period of time that they let the trustees in the locked room where they couldn't have cameras or pencils or paper. And I read it, and there were some changes in there that I disagreed with strongly enough that I voted against it, but not for the reasons you're giving me. Now I've got an enormous amount of respect for somebody like that.
Sure.
But don't give me these windy, empty arguments that we need to reach more alcoholics. We've reached enough. We haven't done a good job with the one we've reached.
When we've reached, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good. How many alcoholics haven't heard of AA, haven't been to an AA meeting, haven't had somebody from AA, hand them literature or something? They all have. We don't need to throw the net any wider. We need to make the webbing smaller in the net so we catch more.
Yeah, gotcha. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And we need to take care of the family members we now have properly.
Yeah.
Giving people rides to a meeting but never taking them through the steps is an injustice. You might as well just shove a bottle down their throat and tell them to have a good day. I mean, I don't get it. And you know what? I mean, you have seen it. You've been around long enough to see this way longer than I have. When they ask, who in this room is willing to be a sponsor, raise your hand. That's always been a little weird to me because that shows that people individually aren't making the approach. But here's one for you. Nobody in a room of 80 people raised their hand. What? You got to be kidding me. Right? And I'm like, okay.
Let's say you're not actively working with somebody. You aren't in the step process with them somewhere.
Yeah.
Or you don't have a ton of sponsees that you're just keeping them close to 10, 11, and 12. You should be raising your hand. You want to learn. A lot of the times that, well, I don't really feel qualified. You want to learn something, teach it.
Amen.
You know what I mean?
Oh boy, do I ever.
Open the big book. Maybe you've never opened the big book before. Open the big book and start going through it with a new person and start discovering stuff with them.
Yeah.
With them.
Yeah.
You can do that.
At the very least, you're going to make a good friend.
Yeah. You'll stay sober if you do that.
Hey, listen, I wanted to rewind for a minute. We used the term relapse prevention earlier about things that just weren't sufficient to prevent relapse. It might give some education, like in the schools and that kind of thing. I wanted to say the term relapse prevention, I love what the Came to Believe recovery folks have. They've switched that up. And they refuse to call it relapse prevention anymore. They call it recovery assurance.
Yeah, that's really good.
I love that. And how do we assure that you stay recovered? By living in the go, 10, 11, and 12. But you got to get from 1 to 9 before you can get to 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
All right. Next week, our pioneers overseas. Interesting.
Yeah, we're starting to get into the weird articles. We're going to start getting into memorial articles and stuff, and we'll just have to see how that goes, Monty.
Yeah. Well, as always, a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll get some comments. We usually do. If you'd like to comment, folks, please do so. If you're not on a podcast platform that allows you to comment, you can always email us at take12radio@comcast.net. You can find all the information at take12radio.com on your internet dial. All right. Until our next broadcast, this is the Montyman along with Chris S., and we're wishing God's perfect serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Montyman, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
This has been a Chicken and a Pig production.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.